This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Car Talk with Katie the Carlady.
Hi.
Welcome.
This is the first time I get to meet people like face to face. Well, face to screen.
Exactly. And there are people on YouTube watching this live right now. So that's a fact.
Awesome. Well, welcome. I'm super excited to kind of catch up with technology. And I'm Katie O'Toole Smith, Katie the Carlady. And I have been in the auto industry for 25 years and really working on changing the conversation between consumers and dealers on both sides, but also empowering people to make better choices and to navigate so that it can be so much more of a more desirable experience, right? With still keeping customer service in place. So I started this podcast all about empowering people and wanting to educate consumers and bringing information from people who I know that I think are awesome and share such a great view of what I'm trying to communicate to the public, to consumers, to people who listen. So welcome. And our guest today is not only a friend of mine, but someone who I was so just, when she came to me and was talking about getting a car, she's like, she was so educated. She had research. And I thought, oh my gosh, you're a dream person because you just had so much information. Well, here to come find out, she has a lot of history in the financial industry, being a financial journalist, working with bonds over in Australia, writing for the Plain Dealer. And so she brings some awesome information to the table. And so I'm super excited. So I want to say hi, Becky Gaylord.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
We're so glad to have you. And we're going to talk about today. You and I have talked a lot about the things that not only you have experienced personally in the process of buying a car, but also your background and what that does, how that helped you in your process. So I guess give a little background about yourself, share, and then I want you to share, shared a story with me about one time about buying a car, and I want you to share that about, it had to do with buying some extra service products. And I would love for you to share that, and then we'll kind of go from there and talk about that. So tell us a little bit about you. And
Yeah, well, so thanks again, Becky Gaylord. Thanks again for having me and for that intro. Kind of hope I live up to the hype.
You will.
I think if I could boil down the thread through my career would be that I'm a professional communicator. As you said, I do have a history as a journalist, and the biggest chunk of that time was as a financial journalist. And I did, that was in Washington, D.C., and Sydney, Australia, and then Cleveland. And also then I when I left the industry, left the Plain Dealer was the last paper that I was at, I started my own PR and communication shop. So from the side of covering it and having to try to ask questions and figure out what the story was, then I was in a role of helping clients to do their messaging and their communication. And it helps to be curious. And I think I've been curious the whole time and kind of ask questions and try to figure out why. So that would be, I think, the theme of what's led me through my arc, and then to you as a car buyer. But
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So there's something you shared last time, and as you're going to tell this story, and it was I have used it ever since you told me. I think I've used it a million times, and it's measure what matters.
Yeah. So, we talked a lot when I was just at the first part of the process of buying a car. And, it seems like, and I discovered this too. I rediscovered this because I hadn't been in the market for a new vehicle in like 11 years or so, how focused the dealers I was speaking with were on monthly payment. Mm-hmm. And really, that can be such a, it can be such a fuzzy figure. It can kind of confound, it basically blurs, I guess would be the right way that I
And
want to
leave
describe
money
it.
on the table and you don't even know it.
Well, right. It blurs the focus on what maybe the car buyer's focus should be. That
Yep.
may be what the car dealer's focus is. So the kind of like measure what matters is that, well, what matters for me as a car buyer? And when we were talking about it, I mean, I don't think there's one right answer. There's what, one thing might be, what's my credit rating? What's my credit score? Before I go buy, I want to figure out what that is. And type in, you can even Google credit score interest rates, and you can find out like where you are and then where you're going to be able to borrow. And so that may not be the thing for you, but monthly payment is really not, ultimately it's the cost of money and the cost of the car. First of all, you kind of have to figure out how much of a vehicle do you need? I mean, I was really trying to go down from a three-row big Honda Pilot, and I didn't need that much. So I was really trying to, for me, the measure what matters was really, well, what do I need it to use it for? And all those things can be confusing, but once I figured that out, once I figured out the size I wanted, kind of the gas mileage I wanted, and I knew what credit score I had, then I feel like I was empowered to be able to go in when I was talking with the dealers and to kind of like get them away from the monthly payment thing. And the reason is that you just alluded to, they can basically, I think, get away with a lot of magic tricks by focusing on that and away from what
100%.
matters. Yeah.
And they get away from math, right? Like people will say, well, I want to buy this $30,000 car, but I want to pay $200 a month. And you say, well, you can't do that. And they're like, why? Because of math. So if numbers don't, when you say focus on the price of the car, if you negotiate a good price of the car, it's going to be what it's going to be in that payment. Numbers don't lie.
Right. No, I agree what you're saying. And like, for example, with mine, I did have a trade-in, and it was a pretty substantial trade-in. I mean, I was joking. We talked before about my very first car where I made we're always going to make mistakes. We have to just learn from the mistakes. We're not going to make perfect decisions. But with my first car, I ended up making a mistake about financing, as you alluded to at the beginning, service stuff, products and things that I didn't really need. But I had a trade-in with this example and the last one we bought, and really almost segmenting that out and focusing first on what's the best price I can get for this car once I figured out what it was going to be. So like not even going to the dealer when I was still like fuzzy about it, because then I'm even more, I guess, malleable. I'm like, I'm easier to lead. So from the dealer, I have less power.
Right.
So knowing what I wanted, and then focusing almost like a laser on getting the very best price for those exact specifications that I wanted. And we left aside the trade-in.
Yes, as a separate transaction.
A second phase.
That's right.
And to really like resist and push back. And I did actually have to do a lot of pushback from the dealers who wanted to force that piece of the deal, which definitely was a relevant piece, but to force that to stay separate. They really wanted to bring that in, and you'll maybe talk more about that.
Because then they can blur the numbers.
Right. And so then what they wanted to look at was this, like, I guess, call it a global picture of what they were going to give me for my trade-in, which let them also have more wiggle room. If we're going to look at it as like, just what's the best price you're going to give me as the buy side, right? And then separately, what's the best deal you're going to give me on the sell side? I'm selling back my trade-in. Right. And that gives me more power to look at those things as I get to look at the best deal, not, I don't give that back to them.
100%. And even asking them, hey, is this number a number you would write me a check for?
That's a great idea. I didn't think about that.
Because when I give people a number, they can either take the cash, they can trade it in, they can do whatever they want. It is a separate transaction depending on what they choose to do. So I love that you say that, because I think people don't know they can do that.
Yeah, well, information is power.
Yes.
And the tools that we have now, I mean, even like from a couple years ago,
It's
that,
amazing.
you know, it really is so it's money in your pocket, you know, to go and find, you know, like if you're, I don't know, you know, if you've got a credit score that's going to get you the ability to borrow at a certain percent, and you're aiming for a better credit score so you can borrow at a lower percent, you can actually type in to, you know, finance calculator, just Google find car finance calculator and put in what the actual total, that's the other thing we talked about when we were like the measure what matters. What's the total price of the deal? So look at what the different interest rate, like let's say, just to throw out a round number, I'm able to borrow at 5% versus 10%. Well, to actually take that interest rate and to put it in a car finance calculator site, a lot of Edmunds, other car places have those sites, those tools on their sites.
Well, yeah.
And actually just put in, you know, what the price of the car is, what the term of the loan would be, and then what the total price of the deal would be at 5% versus 10%, or even lower these days. You know,
now we're in the threes,
right? Or
unless you get 0 at the manufacturer.
Yeah. And so you can see what the total price of the deal is over the life of the term. And that's one of the things, I mean, it makes thousands of dollars of difference. And what I was saying in one of our conversations was that one of the ways the dealers likes to steer it to monthly payment is that you can kind of like smooth out when there's a difference that big. When you're looking at the deal over, say, like 6 years, and what it's going to cost a consumer to borrow at 10% versus 5% based on their credit score, or
it's huge.
You know, that if on a monthly basis doesn't look that scary, doesn't look that bad, but the fact is, it really is. It's a huge, and in fact, it may even be worth holding off and 5-6 months if you can to just get your credit score that much lower, well, so that you can get a better interest rate.
So side note, I just did a quick Google while you were talking to say, hey, what websites? There's bankrate.com, calculator.net, there's Edmunds, there are just a ton of them. Bank of America. You can Google it and find and I just put in car calculator. So you're right. And one of the things I tell people is make sure you put your taxes in. And usually there are 2 other things that, depending on the state you live in, you'll have a doc fee. Like in Ohio, it's $250, and some states are more, some states are less. And you have a title and registration, which, like in Ohio, $33.50, but it could vary a little bit. But put those in there, and then you're able to you can get it down really close.
Right.
The one thing you said about payment that's so important, and we talked about this the last time, was, you know, with when you talked about learning that experience when you bought your Toyota Celica, your very first car, and you talked about that experience, and you said, you know, they said it's only $20 a month or something. It was, you mentioned how they said it's only this much per month.
Yeah. And it's really easy to basically,
it's so easy to let that happen.
You know, and I don't want to say that they're like playing games. It's just that what they're doing, what dealers are doing,
make money.
They're using the leverage that they have, and so that's why it's so helpful to go in with that homework. And I actually pulled the numbers. I'm gonna just like look at them, because what had happened is that when I financed what it was the maintenance, and I thought, well, you know, I'm right out of college. I don't know if I'm going to have money laying around to like stay in, you know, up to date with the maintenance. And so I had financed a maintenance package that was like $3,000 over the 5-year term. And I didn't realize, because this was 1990, because I'm, you know, old as the hills. And we talked about how interest rates.
Okay, stop.
Interest rates were they were so much higher. So
they
like
were different. You know, it was a different time.
Would be around, I don't know, low single digits now. Well, the prime rate then was 10%. So I borrowed it at 13.9%, which sounds really, really bad. It wasn't probably fabulous, but it was only like, you know, relatively speaking. The point is 14% is a high interest rate. So to pay for that $3,000 package over the course of those 5 years and this is the difference was, trying to find where the figure was. The difference, it was less than $100 or so a month for the different things that I had financed. But over the course of the loan, I mean, it was like almost $6,000 because of the interest rate. And I would have just been better off just taking whatever it was going to be per month and just like putting it in a coffee can or something and making sure I had the stuff saved up for the oil changes, because it costs so much more. And I didn't use that information. I didn't even know actually that it was possible. So I think when I found out that it was possible, I was still at the dealer. And that's one of the other things we talked about, to not let yourself get emotional or attached.
Yes.
I wasn't willing to walk away from that, because by the time I was there, I was like so sucked in.
You had already
hard
pictured
not to
yourself
be.
driving away in the car.
It's hard not to be. But the
I know.
fact
I've done
is,
it. I've done it.
Right. If I had paused and I had said, you know, let me go talk to my mom, who happened to be a CPA, I could have just at least done some figures, and I didn't. And then it turned out to be a really expensive learning experience, you know, but now it's easier to find tools. You can even just excuse yourself, go to the restroom and Google that, you know, like actually look at what the
really
cost
can't, right.
of the deal.
Which is
Right.
another side note that I always tell people: use the 24-hour rule. Feeling emotional, go home and wait 24 hours. They will make more cars, I promise.
Yeah.
You know, like if you take 24 hours, even go home and sleep on it. Because what happens is that emotion decompresses, you know, making financial decisions with our emotions. And listen, I did to myself what I tell my customers never to do. I talked myself into taking a certain amount of miles on my lease. This goes back a few years. And because I was like, oh, it's lower, I'll be able to do it. It's not a big deal. My kids aren't in daycare anymore. Here, I was 6 months in and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I talked myself into that for a lower payment. I mean, I did exactly to myself. And so that was invaluable to me. And so I love that you're talking about that. Like,
yeah, and it's hard to not
mindful.
be emotional about it.
Of course.
But the thing is, and I think this example came up in one of our conversations too. The thing is that I let myself, and this is the trick, I let myself think about this thing, which is actually like a commodity. It's a lot more like a bag of sugar or a carton of eggs or milk. Whatever. I let myself think about it more like the wedding dress or the, you know, like and then, you know, but the thing is once you've got those specs of what you want, you know, I want all-wheel drive, I want this, then it doesn't really matter where you get it. I mean, you can get it at like Save a Lot or Giant Eagle, you know, I mean, the analogy. Right. And the dealers will like to let you think that they're the only one who can give it to you. But the fact is, that's just not true. And so like trying to make sure that you're ready to walk away is basically going to give you dollars. You will walk away with more dollars if you are. I mean, there's just almost no way around it, because they're also willing to lower even their price if they know you're willing to walk away. I found that just in this last go around.
Right. Yeah. Well, and when you're willing to walk away and say, you know what, there will be another one. It will be okay. I'm going to. Now, some people make that decision right on the spot and they're willing to accept whatever goes with that. And that's cool, as long as you know, I tell people come back to me and say, oh my God, I made such a mistake. And I said, so let it be a learning experience, because you can't get out of the contract. Like in Ohio, once you buy a car, you don't get 3 days. You buy it. So I tell people, make sure you know it's a contractual agreement. You know what I mean? So I love that you say that. We also talked about, like, this was something we just talked about in passing, but I'd love for you to share some, maybe your thoughts or whatever on this. Some people will come to me and they'll say, oh, should I use my home equity loan to buy a car because I can buy it at such a low percentage and write off my interest? Should I tell people never take out of your 401k, but some people will. And, credit unions, like, always make sure you have no prepayment penalty, those kind of things. And I don't know if you can shed some light on, like, working in the financial industry and knowing that like, I think people think the dealer is the only way to get the financing. I'm not saying that the dealers aren't a good way to get financing, because
Right.
manufacturers sometimes have killer kick butt deals on 0%.
Right.
But I'm talking about in the big picture.
Yeah. Well, no, so that's a great point, because, and this is where knowing what that total cost of the deal is, and really that's where the interest rate is, where you're borrowing is really the most important driver of that. Because, so I'll just use the example. I was lucky enough, because of the unbelievable deals that were happening
It
as
was
cars
crazy town because of COVID.
they were just coming out, and they were having so much inventory that they actually had to physically move off their lots because it just hadn't moved. So I was able to get a 0% rate
For a
my-
long period of time.
for my loan, right? Which
Yes.
I had to actually stop myself from thinking about, like, in addition to the trade-in, putting more money down. I had to almost stop imagining that, because the interest rate means that the longer the term, the more the deal costs, unless it's 0%. And it's
Right.
so the interest rate really should drive everything. I mean, if you're able to get really, really, really cheap money meaning a low interest rate, it may be that there is something else that, not the 401k, like I said. I mean, I am not a financial advisor, but it's just like, just don't.
Financial
It's just,
advisor
it
either.
has to make sense,
Right.
for your own budget, and for your
Yes.
own, like, for your own kind of the whole, just your whole, I guess,
Right.
household kind of view,
Right.
as far as what you're
FYI,
spending on.
always consult your financial advisor or your
Yeah.
accountant. We're not that. We're just sharing
Right.
experience.
But just like knowing that like borrowing at 0% meant that the cost of my deal was going to be the
Thousands.
cost of my deal at
Right.
year 1 and at year 6. It was literally not going to cost me a cent to borrow that money. Whereas anything, even 0.5 of an interest rate, meant that over time, if the car is X, anything above 0% means it's going to be X plus that interest rate. And so, to me, the last time I borrowed a car, it was low. Can't remember what the interest rate was. It was low. I'm thinking it was like 3 or 4%. So I paid it off in 3 years, because I wanted to, like, pay as little as I could in addition to the price of the car. And now I've got a 6-year loan because I'm borrowing at 0%.
Can you
So-
say why that's important? Because I think that cars are a depreciating asset. So if you're borrowing at an interest rate, it's always great if you can put extra money towards it to pay it off sooner, right? Even if it's a simple interest, correct?
Right. Well, right. Because the deal is that, you don't want, well, it's like a house too. You don't want to owe more to the bank
Yep.
than the asset actually is worth. If you had to turn around tomorrow and sell it, you want to be able to get at least as much on that sale as you actually owe the place you've borrowed for it.
Which can be
So-
difficult your first
Which
3
can
years
be
of your car
difficult.
loan if you bought new.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you paid, I was lucky enough in this position. The last one I bought, not the one at 0%, but even with the low interest rate, we put 50% down. And so that's why I was able to pay it off in 3 years. And if we hadn't been able to put that much down, it would have taken probably longer. So the thing is, like, the really focusing on, well, how much do you want to pay overall, and include the interest. And then if you can, like, make a bigger payment, it's like looking at that big global, this is what the cost of the deal is really important. And then you as the consumer, gets to assess what you want your monthly payment to be. You take that out of the control of the dealer.
Yeah.
And, that, I guess, it just helps give you a sense of what you're valuing. And,
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah. And this is on a purchase, like leasing. I know that some people agree with leasing, some people don't. Leasing has a different formula. But FYI, I always let people know this. If you're leasing and you ask the dealer for the money factor, it's a 0.0024, something like that, and you multiply that by 2,400, it will give you the interest rate. It'll tell you what the interest rate is on the vehicle. It's the coolest. I don't know why. I can't tell you why the formula is what it is. But when you're leasing, you know, you have basically the term, the MSRP, the residual, the money factor, and the payment. Those are the 5 things that if you have 4 of any of those things, you can figure out the 5th thing, which I learned early on in my career, which I was so grateful to financial mentors who helped me understand the back end of financing, because I think it's so important.
Well, and you know, speaking of financial mentors, I was lucky to, as I mentioned, have a mom who's a CPA. But the thing about car purchases, and I've never leased, but the thing about car purchases is that at least my idea with that financing of the maintenance package was in the right league, because it really does pay to keep good care of your vehicle, because unlike the housing market that like you don't really have much control over, like your neighborhood or your city is going to go up and down wherever the real estate's going to go, but I've got kind of direct control over the value of my car within some reason. Like if it's in really good shape, you know, if it's like if the maintenance has been done and keep the records, and you know, it's like the difference when I was looking to trade in that Honda Pilot.
Don't bash it.
Yeah, well, the difference between really excellent condition and poor condition, since it was 11 years old, it was like a $10,000 range. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because that ultimately is just money that I've got a little bit more control over if it's in good shape, you know?
Well, that's true, right? And obviously a Honda will hold its value so much more than some other brands. It just depends on what it is. But if you have a Honda Pilot and it's the leather's tore up and you had a dog in it and you smoked and you did all those things, obviously that car takes a huge, quick cut in half, you know, value. And the other thing is when a car's been in an accident, I mean, unfortunately, you know, Carfax is what it is. It's only as good as who reports. But, you know, if you get in a little accident and really did no damage to the car, nothing, but it went to Carfax because there was a police report, you get punished. And that is one of my pet peeves. It drives me crazy. Now, it is good for people who try to find a car and the car's been in a terrible accident and they fixed it. And you, as a consumer, need to know that if it's buying a used car. But that drives me crazy because that affects the numbers.
Right. No, it's a good point. And I don't mean to sound like I'm off track here, but in that same vein, that something
I kind of went off there.
Yeah, no, because in the same vein of what I've got control over is that if you don't want to end up, if you have a bad accident and you do have to turn around like and sell it, and you end up owing more back to that financer than it's actually worth, that really is a scary situation. And so one of the things you also have control over as a buyer is, and it's not really fun to say this, but to just ratchet down your sights, you know, like I had to tear myself away from looking at the Palisade, for example. I was looking at the Hyundais and I went with the Santa Fe, partly because I wanted to stop getting the bigger.
Which was a great choice.
I was trying to go down from the Pilot, but the Palisade was really beautiful and it had all those nice things. And I was like, I didn't want to buy that much car as far as the expense. I had to really, I had control over, I knew what the Pilot was going to be able to be trade in for. And I wanted a certain number.
I love that.
Total,
well, that's a great tip to tell people, you know, take it down a notch.
Lower. Yeah. I did even look at a lower model price wise, but it wasn't, I've still got 2 kids, like teens. And that goes back to the earlier point about it has to meet my needs. So, so I got really kind of some clarity on my own when I was away from the dealer, and I got my sense of like what the specs were going to be. And so I had to get some reality, and it wasn't really fun, but it let me feel more comfortable. There's nothing worse than, like you're saying, like 6 months into it, panicking that you bit off more than you can chew. like
and you're in a
financially.
6-year contract, right?
Yeah.
That is really a great point to make, is like, if you're not sure, pause, pause, because sit down, do the numbers, because one of the things I hear, like I'm listening to and I'm thinking, yes, if you do your homework, you're not a victim.
Yeah.
You're a volunteer. We are volunteering to do that, to let this happen, versus saying, you know what, I've done my research, I know what I can do. I want to get, going in and saying, hey, I've got a car, I want to buy a car, you want to sell a car, how do we work together?
Yeah.
And finding that. If someone doesn't want to work with you, guess what? It's okay, because
Yeah,
you'll find a car somewhere else.
Totally. You are not out to be making a best friend. It's okay if the dealer just gets a little miffed that you are not
Yeah.
going to help that guy make his numbers that month. It's okay. Back to the house analogy, this is, at least in my experience doing this, really the second largest purchase that I've made over time under the house purchases I've made is my car purchases. And so it really is worth not kind of doing something on the spot. I think, no one would ever go in. Well, I don't know. Maybe someone would. Most people
I'm
wouldn't
sure
go into an
people
open
do.
house. Most people wouldn't go into an open house and then open up their checkbook and then write, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then say, that's it. That's the house I want. Like, boom. But I don't even think about it like that. But in a way, it's worth putting that much kind of, I don't know, like seriousness into it, and to not, because houses can be emotional too, but the way
Of
we go and
course.
the way we finance them, it's almost like our banks take away some of that emotionalness for us, because they make us kind
They
of be
get
more
you, yes, they get you in
sober
reality.
and calm.
Right. But that's, being like, well, if we're lucky, our house appreciates. And our car does not appreciate, it depreciates. But you are correct. And I think when we were talking about the 0%, I was like, do not take money out of savings and put it down on 0%. That's crazy, because your money's earning you, even if it's earning you a minute interest, it's earning something, versus going into zero where you can borrow your money for free. And I think when we looked at it, it was like $1,000 changed your payment like $14 a month. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was like I said, I had to really just get into that mindset that the longer the loan, in this very unusual circumstance of 0%, it didn't matter if it was a longer loan. It wasn't going to cost me anymore. And so you helped me kind of like get back into reality and to remember that, because I'm so used to thinking about interest really is, it's like you're just spending more on the actual benefit to borrow. It does cost you, and in this weird situation, the 0%, it didn't. So you're right. I mean, and that's one of the other things to think about if you're having to try to juggle different buckets of money, to think about, well, look at the interest rate. It's kind of like when people decide whether to pay off a student loan or something else. You want to pay off the loan that's got the highest rate. It's the same idea, right? That if you're making if you're actually earning interest, then leave that, because when you're borrowing to buy a car, you're going to be paying the interest charges. And so to just make sure that you're not kind of, that you're playing smart with the math. And if you have questions, ask, right?
Find someone. Exactly. There are so many websites out there where you can reach out and talk to somebody. And I two things I want to say. One is, you don't have to make a best friend, but you do have the right to demand good service, and someone who will give you good service. I think that's so important, that you feel comfortable with, because there's nothing worse than walking out of the dealership and like, what just happened? I don't like the guy I worked with, or woman, whatever. And there's great people out there, but demanding good service. And, the other thing is that interest, obviously it depends on your credit score. So I think that's important. Like you said, know your credit score. There's many ways to do that, but also know that they can mark up the interest rate and make reserve. So if you get approved at let's say you get approved at 3%, and they say, well, we got you approved at 4%, because they're making a certain amount of percentage on the amount financed. that's his kickback versus a flat rate of whatever what they call the buy rate is. So that's the flat. So I think it's important for people to understand that, to make sure. And I sometimes tell people, get your approval from your credit, from your place beforehand, whether you go to your credit union. Credit unions are awesome. No prepayment penalty. You're usually supporting local. They're good, you know.
Right.
Credit
Right. Well,
unions
it's the same theme. Shop around. It's a different component
do
of the
your
deal.
homework.
Just like the trade-in's a different component from the car purchase, the financing is a different component. See the best rate you can possibly get before you even go to shop. The only reason I actually ended up using the Hyundai finance people was that there wasn't a single other credit union that was going to be zero, even
Right,
though I
that's
was
correct.
going to be able to borrow low. So I was already I'd already shopped that part. I knew that I was going to want to go with that route, but you can kind of break them off, even though to the extent that they can amalgamate them, that gives the dealer power, like to say, even if I would have been approved at a 3% on a credit rating, if I'm going to give all the pieces to the dealer, they're going to be able to control what I borrow at, and they're going to be able to control what I get for my trade-in. If I segment those out, then I get to control. And as it happened, I got more money for my trade-in.
I love that. So
by
that's
breaking that
I
off.
love that. That's a great tip for our listeners. And then for anybody, I think people, you can go on a lot of different websites. And the other thing I want to stress is we don't have to go in there guns ready to duke it out. You know what I mean? You get more bees with honey. So it's just to go in as an educated consumer, treat people kindly. Some people go in there and they want to try to start, I'm going to do this and you're going to tell me. Well, why are they going to want to do business with you? They're not going. They're going to say, okay, dude, bye. Or okay, we're going to take you to the cleaners because you're being a jerk. So it's like, I tell people, I'm like, listen, if you found something you want, think about how you would want to be treated as a salesperson, but do your homework. That's the biggest thing. The biggest reason I wanted to have you on the podcast was because you really stress doing your homework and also the pausing and the segmenting it out, meaning if you need to, I call it a car inventory. If you need to put it on paper and make columns and say, okay, here's my trade information, here's my interest information, here's the car I want to buy, and you can see numbers. Some people are very visual.
Yeah. Right. Well, you've just made such a great arc to what we even started off with the measure what matters, right? Because everyone is going to have a not totally different set of circumstances, but the circumstances are going to be customizable, and like thinking about that and looking at it and doing like that, breaking it out and visualizing it before you even go in to start driving a car is really helpful. It's power.
It is
information.
It is. And so the last kind of tying up our podcast here, the other thing that you shared with me, and I'm gonna, because this was also something, these were the two notes I took when we chatted, and they just made such a big difference to me. What's my ultimate goal? What is the ultimate goal? And you had talked about that. What is the goal at the end of this? Is it to borrow this much? Is it to have this kind of car? What is my ultimate goal at the end of this process? And those were the two things: measure what matters and what's my ultimate goal.
Right.
And know that going in.
Well, what's funny, my goal switched after I saw what I could get for my trade-in.
Interesting. That's good.
And and knowing that I could get the 0%, which meant I could go with a longer term. I went with a 6-year loan, which I would not have done if I was paying interest. So
free.
Right. And so my ultimate goal was to end up for as long as possible without any kind of car payment, but to just own it. And I tend to keep my cars about a decade.
You do. You keep your cars a long time.
Yeah. And I didn't think I was going to be able to make the numbers work for me. And I thought I was going to have to lease, which if that's what if that's what they want to do, I'm not trying to judge that. But
it works different for different people.
For me, being able to own it for, I'm going to target at least 4 to 5 years outright is
Mhm.
that was ultimately what I really had wanted to do. I just didn't think I was going to be able to. And then when measuring, that was my ultimate goal, but in measuring what mattered about the interest rate and then the trade-in value and seeing how that was going to bring the actual price of the car net by the time I traded in, and I wasn't going to pay to borrow for it, that made the price of the car such that I didn't have to lease and I could go with a purchase. And so my ultimate goal,
Shifted.
I said it shifted. It basically went back to what I had been hoping to do, but didn't think I could. So
That I love that you share that. I love that you share that it's okay for us in the middle of the process until we sign those documents, we can shift our thinking or our goal. It's okay. Nobody can make us feel bad. Or nobody can, I say, hit us with a shame stick because we're deciding to choose to go a different direction because our ultimate
right,
goal shifted.
right.
I mean, I
Let
had a
the
customer over
information,
COVID that happened because they got laid off.
Right. Let the information that comes in, like the new information that comes in, allow that to inform where you go with it. And
Yeah.
I had really
Mhm.
kind of been talked into thinking I was gonna have to go with a lease just because I really needed a lower number. I wanted a lower number with that total deal. And I was actually able to get to that same kind of target lower number, but also still purchase because of the information that I was able to take in that hadn't existed until COVID. I mean, the circumstances were, well, maybe the pilot would have given me more money and I didn't know. I hadn't chopped it yet. I didn't know that it was going to be able to keep its value. So those were all good things.
So I think that's a great way to kind of tie this up and say that, measure what matters, know your ultimate goal, and do your homework so that you can really get the deal that's good for you, not the deal that's good for everybody else.
Yeah.
And do your research. And, the interest rate is important, but the price of the car is key. When I send you that invoice and you were able to see invoice pricing and MSRP, that allows you to say, oh, okay, this is the cost of the car, like in black and white from the, invoice. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise. You mentioned a couple things while you were talking about fuel economy, and there's a great website, fueleconomy.gov, that you can compare cars next to each other. It's great. There's a safety, www.safety.gov if you want to compare your safety ratings. And they're awesome. I love to share those things. And then if you want to find out about your credit, there's annualcreditreport.com.
Right.
You can go there. It will not give you a score, but you can see your bureau. And then if any of your credit cards, I know mine do my credit score for free. Although I will say Credit Karma is not always accurate to what the bureaus pull in a auto enhanced bureau.
Right.
So just heads
But
up.
it gives you a pretty good idea.
They do. They're pretty good. So thank you so much.
Thanks again for having me,
Oh my
Katie.
gosh, it's so good. And it's good to see your face virtually, right? We're still doing this virtually. I thank you so much, all those who joined us out there and who, you can, katiethecarlady.com. You can please follow and share Katie the Carlady, my podcast. We really are trying to get information out to people. It's my passion. It's what I love. And if you have suggestions, please comment. Let me know. I want to bring information to consumers. 25 years, I have so much information that I can get to people. And, or if you know somebody that's interested in coming out and sharing their story, their car buying story, I would love to have them. So again, thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie.
It was awesome. And listen, you all have a great week. Enjoy, and make sure we keep safe and wear our masks, right? It's important. It's not
Absolutely.
forever. And yeah, so Karen, I think we're ready to close out.
Well, what do you normally say when we close out?
I say, Carlady out.
Have a great day, everyone.